Let's say someone discovered beyond the shadow of a doubt skill-based damage in Call of Duty. Like,
All right, let's just pretend, guys. I broke into Call of Duty headquarters and we got the code. I'm in their GitHub. Let's just pretend I'm in their GitHub. I can see their code, and we can see that there is indeed skill-based matchmaking or skill-based damage, skin-based damage, etc., etc. So let's just run with it. Let's just see what the thought experiment here is.
Like they found the code and had enough video evidence to show it, then pressed a lawsuit or case against Activision for rigging the game and lying that they didn't do it publicly. After all,
Okay, so we're just gonna assume we're just assuming that that's the case. Let's just run with it and see where this goes.
They clear up publicly that skill-based damage manipulation wasn't a thing? Matchmaking processes don't affect in-game parameters. So yes.
Okay, so this was a question that was a part of the list of other questions in the last video I reacted to by Prime Pete. And at first I thought that this was a question asked by the community, and then I thought that this was their response. So I thought they were being very direct in how they were answering, but it was brought to my attention that this question was actually a question created by Activision and then answered by Activision. So they worded it in a very slimy kind of way where it's like, does Call of Duty matchmaking process impact any in-game elements? Blah, blah, blah. And then, no, our matchmaking process doesn't impact any in-game elements. So it's like, what about all the other stuff, right? And yeah, so this is a very kind of grimy way of, it's like political speak or political jargon or very like corporate sounding, you know, to like do it in this manner. Like they could have easily just said like, they could have framed the question like, does Call of Duty rig your games or not at all? And then they could have just said no, but they didn't do that. They got hung up on this very specific word of matchmaking.
So they did clear it. Wait, no they didn't. They said the matchmaking doesn't change your bullet damage. Wait. Hold on, stop. So if somebody discovers skill-based damage truly exists, for example, beyond the shadow of a doubt, there is no lawsuit to be had because Activision never actually claimed that it wasn't in the game. They just said the matchmaking doesn't do it. And this is just basic.
Yeah, which is true because the matchmaking does not impact gameplay elements, right? Because matchmaking is its own separate process. So even if there's the whole theory of like, let's pretend skin-based damage is a thing. Like, yes, matchmaking will put you up against other players that have skins and maybe you don't have skins. But that whole process of like linking you together and getting you into the same kind of game has nothing to do with like the actual game, like the actual gameplay and the game state. Like once the matchmaking is done, it's done. And you're now like, there's another set of code that's firing off to run the game loop. And it could be checking things like, oh, like what are the player skins or like what's happening in game, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a totally separate process. Like matchmaking is a separate process than like the game code that's running. So of course matchmaking is not going to have an impact on gameplay because it's totally unrelated.
Legal logic here. I'm not saying something groundbreaking. Just use your brain. Have you ever gotten bad damage or hit registration or ghost bullets or died around a corner and then instantly said, this matchmaking sucks? No one...
Yeah, it's like you're not going to complain about... I mean, you might complain... So you could complain about the matchmaking of it's affecting who I'm getting in the game with, and then that affects my gameplay because the people I'm in the game with are better, but it's not like it's actively something that's affecting your gameplay in terms of like state manipulation or anything like that.
No one has ever done that ever in the history of gaming. Therefore, it's not unreasonable to
You wouldn't blame matchmaking for the bullets. You would just blame matchmaking for like, I'm in a lobby full of sweats right now. But yeah, you wouldn't blame it for like the bullets are suddenly doing more or less damage because of the matchmaking process. It might be more so a byproduct of I'm in a lobby now with people that have potential skins or something, or that don't have skins or whatever it may be. And then that check that's happening is a different check. It's happening over here in the game loop as opposed to over here in the matchmaking. So it's a weird kind of, it's like very coupled, but it's also separate.
Not trust Activision here when they dance around the question like this. Let's say you're in an arcade and you're using the same logic as a Call of Duty shill has. You ask the arcade, hey, is this claw machine rigged to let go of the prize before you can get it? And they tell you, no, sir. The button you press to drop the claw does not rig how tight the claw's grip is whatsoever. We promise. Now, would you say, oh...
The classic claw machine example. I love it. But yeah, it's like the button doesn't do anything, and then you might take that and run with it and be like, oh, okay, that's great, then I'm not getting scammed. But it's like, nah, you're still getting scammed because the rigging doesn't happen and it's not a part of the button pressing. It's just behind the scenes kind of thing. It's a totally separate process.
Oh, that's great. That means the claw machine will definitely not let go of the Nintendo Switch in there on purpose if it hasn't made the right payout. This is the poor, sad way that people who defend Activision think. Now, would you say that, or would you say, well, yeah, the button isn't rigged and it doesn't even control the tightness of the claw's grip? I'm talking about, is the claw itself rigged? Is the grabbing rigged? Is the machine...
Yeah, so like in this example, the actual rigging mechanic would, once again, I think I talked about this in another video, it's like based on how much money has been intaken, whatever, by the machine, and then once it's received a certain like threshold amount to know that the machine is indeed profitable, then it will proceed to like to not loosen the claw and then dispense the product. So like that is the logic, but that's totally separate from like the button physics, right? Of how hard you're pressing the button. It has nothing to do with it, but it still stands that the thing could still be rigged.
Itself rigged in any facet whatsoever. One of these lines of logic means you're a total moron who let anything slide. One of these means you actually know how to read and think for yourself. See, the fact that Activision answered like this, instead of clearing up the fact entirely that skill-based damage wasn't in COD, is extremely suspicious. And if you want to be smart...
Yeah, I would just say, like, the easy way to get around this would be, like, they could just address, like, is Black Ops 6 or is Call of Duty, is Activision rigging the games at all in any sort of way? And then they could just say yes or no. It's a yes or no question.
Pay attention and listen to me here. And don't click off the video just because you're bored or you don't want to hear it because your attention span is fried from Instagram Reels and Black Ops 6. Them
for me, it's TikTok, unfortunately, but yeah.
telling us the matchmaking doesn't affect in-game parameters like damage is just like the guy at the arcade telling us the button to drop the claw doesn't affect the effectiveness of the claw when grabbing a prize. It has no correlation with the coding or the mechanism that would cause the claw to drop the prize, despite it being used in some way to activate the process of playing the game.
That's a good point, because it is very, like, even the verbiage, because it is kind of weird, like if it was a skin-based damage kind of thing, let's pretend, going on. Like that is a result of the matchmaking process of like they did put you in a lobby potentially with people who did have skins when you did not have skins or something like that. It's a result, but the process itself is not the thing that is impacting gameplay, or it wouldn't be the thing that's impacting gameplay. Like the result of the process might be. So you can even word it. There's just so many ways to word this to like get around like the actual topic at hand.
The game. Just like how you'd be suspicious of the arcade guy telling a half-truth, we have to pay attention to how Call of Duty handles this accusation about damage being rigged. See, the matchmaking only makes the matches. The matchmaking algorithm is completely incapable of changing anything within the game and is entirely disconnected from any potential algorithm.
Yeah, it's going to be separate. Like you probably have, once again, even separate developers working on, like, at least, like, so like from in the game that I'm working on, like the side project, it's just a totally separate thing. Like matchmaking is its own beast of a thing to figure out, and you could have a whole dedicated team just to that, and then you have an entire team dedicated to the like the net code and then the game state and all of those sort of things. So it's just a totally separate like process. I mean, now they can be linked together obviously, because when you matchmake, you're going to be putting people together in a lobby that ultimately go into a game, and that can have an effect on stuff. But once again, it's like once the matchmaking is done, that code is not being used for anything, for like the actual game.
Processes that may affect your damage. It's not a conspiracy anymore. They're being quite obvious with it. They don't want to answer this question, and I'll explain why. This rumor could have easily been squashed a long time ago, like back in Black Ops 4 when it first started making the rounds, but it wasn't. They've had 6 years to just say, hey players, skill-based damage doesn't exist. You can stop complaining. Now,
and another thing that's pretty interesting to think about is like why they might avoid this. For like, well, it could be for multiple reasons. One, they don't want the players to feel cheated, like if it does actually exist. Another one could be, let's put on our other hat here. Like we could always assume that it does not exist and that they're just not saying anything about it because they know it's going to drive like traction and hype and views. Like it's going to cause controversy. And when you have controversy, it leads to like negative attention, and any attention is good attention when it comes to like relevancy, right? So they could also be radio silent on this just to drive up like controversy, whether it's true or not, kind of thing. So it's just interesting to think about. There's so many factors here.
Now, if you're watching this video, chances are you're aware that this theory is blowing up with more clips, videos, and evidence than ever before in Black Ops.
Yeah, I am quite aware. I posted a random video and got more views than I have gotten in quite a long time. So that was pretty interesting.
6, and we still have radio silence from Activision. X-Defiant had notoriously bad hit registration, and the devs were constantly updating us about the state of the game, and knew that hit registration was being affected by the quality of the servers. With COD, they haven't even touched the issue, except for this one time when they completely dodged the question. Not even a sorry guys, our low tick rate servers and poor netcode that was better 10 years ago is causing bullets to appear like they're not doing damage.
And then one of the things that's interesting is, like, so back in the day, I believe Call of Duty, like when Call of Duty 4 was out, like kind of during that time, I think it was like a peer-to-peer hosting model as opposed to the server authoritative model. I'm pretty sure, to where like there would be an established host, like let's say it's me, and then I am acting as the authoritative server and the client, like connecting into that. So like the connection can actually be better. It's a higher risk for cheating to happen, but there's a like better potential for like good connection, because like I'll have the best connection because it's on my own network, like the server, the authoritative server. And then if people are geographically located around me, like if it's in like a suburb or something, like it's going to be a lot closer to connect into my server if I have a good network, like if my internet's good, versus like going out to some like wherever the dedicated servers would be hosted with the authoritative server model, which is probably managed by like AWS or something, like Amazon Amazon Web Source Service, whatever, Amazon Web Service. Sorry, it's a side point, but yeah, it's just so that also plays a factor, is that the model is just totally different of how they're doing things. So that could be a reason why the netcode was better back in the day, because they switched the model of how they implement stuff.
Completely and utterly ignoring the issue, despite skill-based damage clips starting to trend on social media more than they ever have before. The only time it's been addressed publicly is the one time they dodged it in this statement. But then we find this. And this is brand new. We've identified an issue that could result in erroneous visual blood effects when damage was not actually dealt while shooting at enemies in all modes. I had a stroke reading this, but I think what they're saying is that blood will appear even though damage was not actually dealt. Now, they don't.
Yeah, so most likely, I would imagine that this is happening as a result of, how do I explain this? Like the client-side prediction stuff that we were talking about in the other videos, where on my screen, I take an action and then it has an instantaneous effect, but I still need to relay that to the server, and then the server needs to get back to me and confirm that the action that I took was indeed the valid action, like based on the game state that the server has. So what's probably happening is they're playing the blood effects on the client immediately for the sake of like smoothness, so it feels good, like when you're shooting somebody. But then the server's coming back later, and then it's taking away your hit. It's saying like, no, you didn't actually hit that guy. But it's awkward because, well, then why is the blood effect playing? So what probably needs to happen is they probably need to change the blood effect from being like a client side only sort of thing to be a part, like to have, so like when the server comes back through and reconciles and says, no, this is the actual game state, that's probably when they want to tie the blood effect to say like, oh yeah, you did indeed hit that dude, then play the blood effect, as opposed to playing it like prematurely. So it could result in a little bit of lag on the blood effect, but it would be more like a more accurate representation of what's going on, as opposed to probably how it's happening now, where yeah, it's like instantaneous, but it's not the truth, if that makes sense. It's probably like a netcode thing, I would imagine. But even then, like you could, it could be one of those, well, why isn't my hit registering, right? Is it because of is it a latency issue where they just weren't in that position, and then that's why I didn't hit them? Or was there some damage reducer being applied, or like what's going on, you know? So it could be a mix of things.
They don't specify whether or not damage.
But the overall reason that it's happening is probably the client is playing the blood splat animation without getting confirmation from the server, like one way or another.
Should have been dealt, or if you actually miss but you see blood anyways. There's actually no specification here, but this isn't the main point. There is a community note that says there's a hit registration issue, so that clears it up a little more, but we don't actually know what Call of Duty was trying to say here. But anyways, this isn't what I'm really talking.
Yeah, once again, I think it's most likely there's a client-side blood effect that's playing, like on your machine, like the code is firing off and it's not waiting to be reconciled by the server. So whether you hit that dude or not, if you hit him on your screen, it's like it's playing the effect as if you hit that dude. But then if the server comes back later and says, nah, you didn't actually hit that dude, well, then you're just kind of left with this awkward, well, the blood effect already played, so like, what do we do now, kind of thing. But it's just, well, you didn't hit that dude for whatever reason, according to the server.
Talking about. Just the fact that this happened is enough to prove my point. So instead of tackling and debunking rumors that aren't only defacing the game, but actively causing players to leave and quit the game, they instead hyperfixate on one issue where blood will show and not a hit marker, which is apparently due to some...
Okay, and then blood will show but not a hit marker. So if the hit marker is showing appropriately, that would probably tell me that the hit marker is tied to the logic that is, like when the server comes back and confirms the hit, that is when the hit marker will show up on your client. That's when they would just need to move the blood effect to whenever the hit marker shows up, assuming the hit marker is showing up correctly.
Some research, an issue with misaligned hitboxes and not the servers, as per this clip in a Blame Truth video that I'll link. If skill-based damage was nothing more than conspiracy and it was completely wrong, why not...
Misaligned hitboxes. That's an interesting one. Like, the only thing I could think of on that is, one, like, just the hitboxes are jank, obviously. Two, there could maybe be a scenario, I'd have to think about this one for a little bit, but there could be a scenario where they like increase the size of the hitboxes intentionally, maybe for some reason. I don't know, I'd have to think about that one. There could be an intentional reason for it to like make the game feel smoother in certain circumstances, but I can't say off the top of my head for sure. So they could just be jank hitboxes. Let's be real.
Not come out and squash the rumors years ago and tell us it's an issue with the servers they're working on fixing, or that we're just complaining about nothing. They've had more than enough time to do it, and there's only one reason they haven't. It's because if they...
I always wondered, like, do they know? I mean, obviously they know that everyone's complaining because they did that like self-question, self-answer thing. Because I was about to say, like, who is making the decisions to not respond to you guys? That's what's very interesting to me. Like, somebody is actively sitting there and like saying, nah, let's just not respond to them, or let's respond to them in this specific way, you know? It'd be one thing if they just had no idea that you guys were even upset or complaining, but I doubt that, right? Because they already addressed you guys with the question, self-answer thing, so they obviously are aware that people are complaining. So I'm just wondering, like, who is making that decision to say, let's respond in this very specific manner, but not this other way.
Saying the matchmaking doesn't affect anything, but instead told us that nothing whatsoever in Call of Duty's entire existence as a whole...
Hey player, we see the rumors about skill-based damage. Call of Duty does nothing whatsoever that changes your damage mid-match. We are working on netcode. Wait, is he saying that this actually happened, or is this like a...
anything, but instead told us that nothing whatsoever in Call of Duty's entire existence as a whole...
Let me rewind
anything, but instead reason they haven't. It's because if they came out and instead of saying the matchmaking doesn't affect anything, but instead told us that nothing whatsoever in Call of Duty's entire existence as a whole manipulated our bullet damage, they would face serious trouble if somebody...
I think that was like a fake tweet, I'm assuming. I was kind of like brain fog for a second there, but yeah, if they told you that nothing whatsoever is manipulating your game state in like a rigged manner, then yeah, that's like a legal kind of thing to where if somebody was to prove otherwise, then they can get in trouble. But the way they worded it with the first question or the first set of questions, right? Well, they're technically telling the truth, right? They're trying to technically tell the truth while avoiding the overall like concern at hand kind of thing.
Actually discovered it and they were lying. If somebody actually proves skill-based damage after they completely and totally deny it, that's a solid open and shut legal case in which Activision could lose insane amounts of money because they...
I would always wonder about that. I'm trying to think about that now. Like, could you lose money for like lying to the community? Because like, what if it was proven true? What if they did tell you guys like, oh yeah, we don't do that, but they do? I'm just trying to think. Can you be held liable for that? Like, it's just a game, I guess. But yeah, but I think because you're spending money for the game, there's probably some sort of like contract there that like what you say is in the game needs to be in the game. Otherwise, it's false marketing. So that's probably the angle that would be taken in a legal standpoint, I'm guessing. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine like you could say it's false advertising because you guys said that there is no rigged anything whatsoever. But then I got this game and there was this kind of rigged mechanic in the game. So that should have been made clear to me. So I guess that's the angle that would be taken.
They lied publicly to their players directly about a manipulative practice. That's pretty akin to gambling. The lack of any communication from Activision about skill-based damage should really upset and worry you as a COD player. If you just say, they're not addressing it because it's a small issue that only a few players suspect, or it's just so stupid they can't be caught playing into it, then you're just completely wrong and simply trying to evade everything I've just said.
Dude, if once again, if my game ever does come to fruition, I'm gonna put skill-based damage in and skin-based damage as like a joke on April Fools or something. I'm just gonna make it so obvious, and then I'll turn it off just for fun.
One, they've already addressed it publicly in a fashion that was incredibly suspicious, clearly trying to do damage control. And two, they've ignored other issues that were legitimately proven, like the double XP event not giving actual double XP, different XP being granted based on the map being played, and even the fact that they purposely planned for the new pistol to be unachievable in the latest event so that they could peddle the bundle it was in so people could unlock it early to make...
And another thing is, like, once again, software engineering, like the development cycle, there's like a lot of things that could be wrong here, like all these bugs or all these manipulations or whatever. And at the end of the day, it's like they have to choose and prioritize what they're going to work on next. Like whether it be like a team of 1, 5, 100, there's always going to be like a priority. It's like a backlog. So software teams will maintain a backlog of things that they need to work on, and they prioritize like what's, what needs to be worked on in this current iteration of like 2 weeks in this current sprint, let's say. So yeah, it could just be one of those things where they're like, all right, we're just going to focus on this one thing and we're going to stay radio silent on all this other stuff because we don't even have any idea why it's happening, or maybe they do know why it's happening, but they just don't want to address it currently because they're going to focus on this other thing at hand. Like maybe the double XP thing is the most recent bug that they're going to focus on or something, and they're not going to address anything else until the double XP thing gets fixed or something like that. Because it's just like, at the end of the day, it's manpower that needs to fix this stuff. So, yeah.
Some extra profits. All of these practices are greedy, dishonest, shady, and manipulative, and proven, not just speculated, but proven to have happened. And they've said nothing about them at all. Because how can they? They can't deny them, because there's not a doubt in anyone's mind and the evidence doesn't lie. And they can't address them as an issue because they don't want them to change because they affect player retention and revenue. That sounds exactly like them dodging skill-based damage, doesn't it? Ah, now the light bulb is going off in your brain. They can't deny it because they'd be lying, and they can't address it as an issue because they don't want to fix it as it rakes in more money. But the one thing that's different is the fact that they've tried to address it once already, and they did it in a clever way so as to not actually tell the truth about the situation, which I've exhausted at this point. So the fact they tried to dispel the rumors goes to show that exposing this practice was actually hurting the game and its reputation in some way that Activision genuinely didn't like and was genuinely afraid of jeopardizing sales. They just had...
Well, yeah, it's like if it becomes made aware to the players at mass, then the players will feel like they're being cheated, and it might like decrease the intent, like the want to play the game, right? So the skill-based matchmaking probably does work very well when you don't know that it's happening in terms of addicting you. But when you know that it's happening, or you think that it's happening, whether it is or not, like that will have a negative impact from their perspective because no one wants to feel like they're getting cheated. So it would be in their best interest, if it does exist, to stay quiet about it so that it can just like dupe the vast majority of players so that they can continue churning out games in this skill-based matchmaking cycle without being aware of it, kind of thing, because it will be very effective if you don't know about it. So
I had to do it in such a way.
It's like the same thing at casinos, right? It's like they have very effective mechanisms of getting people to lose their money there, but if you genuinely knew like how it was operating, you might feel like, I'm not going to go in there because I'm going to get cheated out of my money. But because you don't know that, or maybe the average player doesn't know that, they're more enticed to keep going in there thinking it's like a fair kind of system where they could potentially win money.
Way that if someone actually proved it was there beyond the shadow of a doubt for all to see, they could get out of a legal case because technically the matchmaking doesn't affect anything in an actual match, and that's all they said about it. Again, when have you ever gotten bad damage, hit reg, visibility, or lost your aim assist and then said, this matchmaking is terrible? It's absolutely ridiculous. This answer makes absolutely no sense and is clearly worded in a way that is meant to be misleading. And
yeah, it's like matchmaking process doesn't impact gameplay. It's like, yeah, obviously, it's like, is the sky blue, right?
Do damage control, not actually to deny anything. That, along with the fact that they haven't done anything to legitimately squash the rumors for 6 years, and this answer was the best we got, shows that they cannot and will not outright deny the existence of damage manipulation. The Erroneous blood splatter post was a pathetic attempt at trying to explain something that isn't even the problem. Instead, it's misaligned hitboxes, which is not what we're talking about here. I'll bet you that they were praying the conspiracy theorists took this as an acknowledgement of the damage and hit reg problems and used it as as an explanation, despite it doing nothing of the sort. At this point, it is far more reasonable to believe something far more fishy and manipulative is going on than it is to...
And then even with the blood thing, the blood splatter thing, I'm just thinking like even if it is a poor netcode implementation or whatever, like it still doesn't necessarily rule out that they're doing like some sort of skill-based damage, right? Because it's like, well, why is the server telling me that I didn't hit this guy? It could genuinely be because of, once again, like the network connection is bad or something, and like that guy wasn't there in the physical space of the game state. So that could be one reason. But it could be like, other stuff like the skill-based damage that you guys are talking about. Because like the blood effect is just a byproduct of the client is prematurely firing off that blood splatter effect, and then the server's getting back and saying, nah, you didn't hit that guy. But we're looking at that little part of, well, why didn't I hit that guy? And it could, once again, be for many reasons.
To believe that Activision is doing absolutely nothing manipulative in real time within the game. In fact, it is naive and foolish to think that with how they've handled the accusations and how greedy they are, that nothing is going on. These guys are as shady as they come. Ignorance is bliss, and seriously, I am afraid for you in your future if you think Activision has your best interest in mind, because I don't know what you'll give into if you really think that there's nothing weird going on with this game. But
yeah, I'll never get that. If there's like dudes who are like try hard defending the company, it's like, why? Like, I don't understand what's the reasoning for being so passionate about it. I don't know. Maybe those types of people are getting upset at the quote unquote conspiracy theorists in the game, and then they think that you guys are just bad at the game or something. Maybe there's some of that going on. It's just funny. I think Call of Duty has always been a very controversial game in terms of the community. Like, there's always something going on, right? Like back in the day, for me, it was always, is it PlayStation 3 or is it Xbox 360 that's better? That was the controversy at the time. But I feel like nowadays, like all the consoles, like no one really cares. And then we've moved on to skill-based damage and skill-based matchmaking and people disagreeing about it. So it is interesting. Call of Duty like community is just always fun to be around and see what they are disagreeing about.
that'll do it. Use your brain and use logic.
I will use my brain and I will use logic.
I'm Prime Pete. Take it easy.
Take it easy, bro. All right, guys. Well, that's all I got. See ya.